Wednesday night study series where we are currently going through Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth. But first, we are going to spend a little time with our daily devotion, which, let me back up a second and say that do not adjust your screens. Just like last Tuesday, my brother filled in for me while I was on vacation. I am filling in for him tonight because he is out again with Bishop Pearson. So that's where he is, and we are going to continue right on with our study series, beginning with our devotion, which is entitled Choosing to Heal. And I love how synchronicity works because the ending prayer of our devotion leads very nicely into our teaching for tonight, and that is something that could not have been planned in advance, but when you are connected to Spirit, that's the kind of thing that tends to happen very often. So let's open our minds and prepare our hearts for our time together tonight by saying our prayer of surrender. Spirit of truth, carry me where you will. Bring to me what you will. Take from me what you will. Awaken in me what you will. The Christ man is around me. The Christ mind is in me. The Christ power flows through me, and the Christ mystery exists as me. I believe it, I perceive it, and now I receive it. I am surrendered. Amen. And so it is. Okay, continuing on with today with tonight's affirmation. Today, I will take up my bed. I will walk down a different street. I will write a new story. I will believe that I deserve peace. I will be made well. I may not know where I am going, but I know where I am not staying. This day I will pursue peace as I choose to heal. So there was so much in just the affirmation portion of tonight's devotion. Let's break it down a little bit. First, this is, of course, based on the Bible story found in the 5th chapter of John about a man who is lame and has been lying by a place called the Pool of Bethesda for 38 years. Now, the reason he's been lying there is because this pool is known for its healing properties. And once a day, as the story goes, an angel of the Lord comes down and troubles the water. And if you get into the water while it is troubled, which I assumed means bubbling up in some way, then you will be healed. Several issues with this. First, the waters being troubled was probably some natural phenomenon that the people of that time didn't understand. So they did what humans do. They filled in the gap of their uncertainty or of their not knowing with a story. And the story they came up with and agreed upon, which coincidentally we'll also talk about later on in the teaching from A New Earth, was that it was an angel of the Lord who was coming down and causing the water to move. So whether or not this pool of water had some innate supernatural healing power is beside the point. It might have, or it might have just been some sort of hot spring bubbling up from underground at regular intervals like the old faithful geyser at Yellowstone National Park. The point is what the people believed, which was that an angel sent from God was troubling the water, and this belief activated their faith, which resulted in their healing. It wasn't really about the literal physical substance or makeup of the water itself. It was about their own faith and belief. There is another story in the Bible about a woman who had also been sick for a number of years, and she said in her heart, if I can just touch the hem of Jesus's garment, I will be made whole. And so that's what she did. And when Jesus felt her do it, he said to her, it is your faith that has made you whole. The Bible says he felt virtue leaving his body, yes, but he's not the one who initiated the healing. she was most likely crawling on the ground. He didn't even see her. We know this because he asked the question, "Who touched me?" It was the woman and her faith that activated the healing. So when Jesus came upon this man lying by the pool, that's why he asked him the question in the way that he did. He did not say, "Do you want me to heal you?" He said, "Will you be made whole?" Because he knew it was the man's choice. Now, I've actually done a teaching on this before. Instead of the man just saying, "Yes, I will," or "Yes, I want to," because in some translations the question is, "Do you want to be made whole?" Instead of just saying yes, the man starts telling Jesus all the reasons he's not healed already, which mainly consist of someone else getting into the water before he does when it becomes troubled. And the reason for this is because there's no one there to help him get into the water. So here we have two classic misconceptions or misperceptions of life and how things work. The first is the concept of lack and scarcity. It's also referred to as the scarcity mentality, which is the belief that there's only so much to go around of any resource, whether it's food or water or money or love or healing. There's a limited finite amount, and when it's gone, it's gone. And if you didn't get any, then you're just out of luck. That's the first incorrect belief that was keeping this man sick or trapped in his illness. This belief was literally keeping him from being healed, not because it was true, but because he believed it was true. Secondly, he also incorrectly believed that he needed something or someone outside, an external force, to help him receive his healing. And this was twofold. The first external source he was depending on or thought was necessary for his healing was the pool itself. He didn't believe he could be healed unless he was able to get into the water at a specific time. And further, he also believed he had to rely on the external source of another person helping him to get into the water. So right there we see he has given all of his power away through those beliefs that he's holding that are not true. How do we know they're not true? Because after Jesus listens to all the man's excuses, he simply says to him, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." And the man did, proving that he could have done that all along. He didn't need anyone else's assistance or the pool, or actually he didn't even need Jesus. If he could have realized on his own that he always had the power to heal himself within himself. Jesus was just the catalyst that helped him get to that knowledge in his mind. Okay, I want to read now from the actual text of the devotion, second paragraph. Notice the lame man could not walk until he chose to take up his bed, move from his environment, and leave the place of pain. Similarly, Jesus healed a blind man, but before he opened his eyes, Jesus led him out of the city where the blind man had lived for years. Sometimes, before we can be healed, we must choose to change our location, environment, mindset, and story. The excuses are many. I don't want to move because I'm comfortable here. Now, I added that part because these surroundings, this illness is what I'm familiar with. It's what I have become used to. This is my story, and I'm sticking to it. We all have reasons, and we all have struggles that can become our stories. The only question we must answer is, will we be made well? Now, the last thing I want to address before we move on to the prayer is this. I want to go back to one of the lines in the opening affirmation, the one that says, "I may not know where I'm going, but I know where I'm not staying." I've talked before about both the concept of the sacred yes and the sacred no, and how both are important. As with everything, we must find the balance, the middle way. Eckhart Tolle, whose book we'll be getting into in a moment, does a lot of teaching about accepting the present moment as it is and not resisting what is. And that's going to enter into tonight's teaching too. But the balance is you don't have to stay where you are presently if it's not serving you, if it's not working for you, if it is not for your highest good. Using the example from the devotion, you don't deny that you're lame or sick. That is what is. But you don't have to remain in that state. And sometimes the sacred yes begins with a sacred no, as the affirmation stated. I may not know where I'm going. I may not have the yes yet. But what I do know is that I'm not staying here. That's the no. I'm not staying in this bed, wasting away like the woman who touched the hem of his garment said to herself, and then she proceeded to get herself where he was. Or the man, I'm not staying on this mat, lying here by this pool, waiting for the water to be troubled, which is what the man at the pool of Bethesda had to say to himself. I'm not staying in this city where I have been blind all my life. I'm not staying in this environment of negativity. Sometimes there has to be a no that leads you to a yes. Okay, so let's say our ending prayer together now for the devotion. Healing Spirit, trouble my water, tear down my resistance, take my pain. I will be made well. Amen. Amen. Okay, moving on. I told you that the devotion was going to lead into our teaching tonight nicely, and here's the connection. In the prayer we just prayed, part of it said, tear down my resistance, and that's exactly where tonight's teaching begins. The first line says, non-resistance is the key to the greatest power in the universe. And what we're going to find out and talk about tonight is non-resistance to what? Before we get into it, I want to remind you of the questions that you might want to consider and answer in order to get our discussion started a little later. I believe they're in your comment or your chat section. The first one actually has to do with what we just talked about in the devotion, and the second one has more to do with our teaching from the New Earth. So I'll go ahead and ask those right now so you can begin pondering them. Number one, why do we hang on so tightly to our stories of limitation and lack? Okay, all of the excuses like the man at the pool. Question number two, what is the purpose, importance, and significance of dreams? And then in parentheses, I put not dreams as in goals or things you want to do, but actual dreams like at night when you're sleeping or when your mind is in a subconscious state. Or I didn't include this in the question, but as we move forward, you'll see also the dreams or the dream in reference to the collective dream or story that we have created together as a human race. So let's jump right in. Non-resistance is the key to the greatest power in the universe. Through it, consciousness, spirit, is freed from its imprisonment in form. All right, time out right here. So I asked the question just a moment ago, non-resistance to what exactly is he talking about here? I think he's referring to the fact that the reality we are currently living in, this world of form, as he refers to it, is in fact a dream, or it's something we have collectively created as humans through our agreement, which we'll also talk more about in just a minute. And when we resist this knowledge that our physical form and the physical form of this world is just something we've created, or in other words, it's a dream state, that's when we get trapped inside it, when we fail to acknowledge that there's a whole world beyond that, beyond what we are experiencing temporarily here on earth. So non-resistance is actually being able to take a step back, see the bigger picture, that there's so much more to life than just this part we are experiencing in our present human physical form. Okay, let's continue. inner non-resistance to form, whatever is or happens, or as he often refers to it, the present moment, is a denial of the absolute reality of form. Okay, so before we go any further, let me say that sometimes, in my opinion at least, Eckhart Tolle gets lost in what I call psychological doublespeak. And I think that's partly due to the fact that English is not his first language, but also because that's just how super smart people are sometimes. They don't know how to simplify a thought. So don't get lost in his wordiness tonight. We're going to break it all down before we get through. Resistance, he says, makes the world and the things of the world appear more real, more solid, and more lasting than they are, including your own form identity, the ego. It, and he's referring here it to the resistance, to this knowledge that the world of form and our bodies are not the total reality, it endows the world and the ego with a heaviness and an absolute importance that makes you take yourself and the world very seriously. All right, I read a quote once that I've never forgotten that said something to the effect that one of the signs that you're about to have a mental breakdown is when you start thinking what you're doing is very, very important, or that no one else can do what you're doing. You become tunnel vision or hyper-focused on some kind of mission to the exclusion of everything else in your life. That's not healthy because that's not living in balance. What he's saying here is that when you start taking things too seriously, they become too heavy for you to carry. So you've got to laugh, like we always talk about, a little, at least a little. You should laugh a lot. All right, back to the book. The play of form, and when he says play here, I think he's equating it to a stage play, or as we've already talked about, a dream state. The play of form is then misperceived as a struggle for survival. And when that is your perception, it becomes your reality. All right, so when we get too attached to or too focused on this physical existence, then we believe or we perceive, and he says this is a misperception, that this is all there is. That there's no reality beyond this. And so because this is a struggle for survival, that's all we have. The many things that happen, the many forms that life takes on, are of an ephemeral nature. They are all fleeting. Things, bodies, egos, events, situations, thoughts, emotions, desires, ambitions, fears, drama, they come, pretend to be all important, and before you know it, they're gone, dissolved into the no-thingness out of which they came. Were they ever real? Were they ever more than a dream? The dream of form? Okay, so right now I want you to think back to when you were in middle school or your preteen and early teen years, when you were just beginning to be interested in romantic relationships. It was so serious. I mean, whether or not your crush, the person you had a crush on, noticed your new outfit was a matter of life and death. Okay, there were so many tears and dramatic displays during those years because it seemed so important to you. But then looking back after you've become an adult, those overly strong feelings and emotional displays seem pretty comical, don't they? So adults refer to that stage of life as puppy love. They say, "Oh, isn't that cute?" But it's very serious to the puppy at the time. So that's what I think he's talking about here. When we wake up in the morning, the night's dream from the night before dissolves, and we say, "Oh, it was only a dream. It wasn't real." But something in the dream must have been real. Otherwise, it could not be. When death approaches, we may look back on our life and wonder if it was just another dream. Even now, you may look back on last year's vacation or yesterday's drama and see that it is very similar to last night's dream. There is the dream and there is the dreamer of the dream. The dream is a short-lived play of forms. It is the world, relatively real, but not absolutely real. Then there is the dreamer, the absolute reality in which the forms come and go. The dreamer is not the person. The person is part of the dream. The dreamer is the substratum in which the dream appears, that which makes the dream possible. So again, don't get lost in the language here. He's about to get to the bottom line, which is this. It is the absolute behind the relative, the timeless behind the time, the consciousness in and behind form. The dreamer is consciousness itself, who you are. And here I think he's referring to your higher eternal self as opposed to your physical, human, individual, temporary self. To awaken within the dream is our purpose now. When we are awake within the dream, the ego-created earth drama comes to an end and a more benign and wondrous dream arises. This is the new earth. All right, so that was a lot, but we're going to explore this idea of life being like a dream, or in the grand scheme of things, in the bigger picture of eternity, by going to a book called The Four Agreements by a man named Don Miguel Ruiz. And this book is based on this theory that everything that surrounds us in both the physical, material world, as well as the rules and the laws we use to navigate through our physical world, has been created through the power of humans agreeing together for it to be the way that it is. He, the author, sees society as the collective dream of billions of smaller personal dreams, which together create the dream of a family, the dream of a community, the dream of a country, and finally, the dream of the whole of humanity. In other words, he believes that all reality as we know it and all the institutions that go along with it are just a creation of our collective minds, and everything exists only because we agree that it does. For instance, let's take the color blue. How do we know that the color blue is what it is? Because when we were little, our mom or our dad showed us something and attached that word blue to it. And then when we went to school, our teachers reinforced that as a fact. Yes, that is the color blue. And every other child we knew was also taught that that was the color that was called blue. And so we all collectively agreed on it, so it became our reality. But according to this theory, if we had called that same color by a different name, as long as we all agreed that that's what it was, then that's what it would be called. This concept goes all the way back to the book of Genesis and to the creation story where God told Adam to name all the animals. And whatever Adam decided to call each animal is what God would also call it. So through the agreement of Adam and God, each animal became what it was, or at least what it was known by. And that is a powerful principle. Two powerful principles, actually, the power of creation coupled with the power of agreement. God created these things, these beings, except animals. And they were not called animals at the time because they didn't have names yet. And then he gave Adam the power and authority to give each one of them a name. So not only did he say Adam could name them, he went a step further and said, Adam, whatever you call or name these creatures, I will agree with you, and that's what I'll call them too. And through the power of our agreement, that is what they will become. That will create the reality of what they are. Don Miguel Ruiz is saying in this book that that's the way everything becomes what it is, except he concentrates much more on the agreement aspect than the creation aspect. Actually, what he is saying is that our agreement itself is what creates reality. and that the reality we now know and are living in is basically a dream world that we have created, as opposed to the original world that God created. And the picture he paints of this world and this reality that we have created for ourselves is pretty bleak. But don't get discouraged by that, because it'll get positive at the end. But I'm going to read from the book now what he said, how he describes this reality we have created through our agreement. He says, "What you are now seeing and hearing is nothing but a dream. Dreaming is the main function of the mind, and it dreams 24 hours a day, awake or asleep. Before any of us who are alive today were born, the humans before us created a big outside dream that we call society's dream, or the dream of the planet. The dream of the planet includes all of society's rules, its beliefs, its laws, its religions, its different cultures and ways to be, its governments, schools, social events, and even holidays. This outside dream has so many rules that when a new human is born, the adults feel they must introduce these rules into his or her mind because we think they will not be able to survive without knowing them. Let me stop here and ask the question, why? Why do we believe that? Because that's what we were taught. Our parents and our teachers and our society taught us the rules and made us believe that we could not survive without them. So we in turn believe our children will not be able to survive without the same knowledge. All the rules they must follow in order to navigate this reality which we have created for ourselves through the power of agreement. The book continues. The dream uses mom and dad, the schools, and religion to teach us the dream. The adults around us put information into our minds through repetition. That is the way we learned everything we know. In this way, we learned a whole reality, a whole dream, how to behave in society, what to believe and what not to believe, what is acceptable and what is not, what is good and what is bad, what is beautiful and what is ugly, what is right and what is wrong. It was all there already before you got here. All that knowledge, all those rules and concepts. It was not your choice to speak the language you speak. You didn't choose the religion, race, or moral values you were born into. They were already present in your culture before you arrived, based on agreements humans who arrived here before you made with each other. And you were never a part of even the smallest of these agreements that you are now expected to live by. Now, this is where I disagree with him just a little. I believe that you can and you do choose some of these things before you're born. But I do agree with him that once you're here, all the rules surrounding those things that you've made choices about, like who your family is and what your race and your gender are, all those things are already in place and have been for a very long time. Okay? As children, we believe everything adults say. We agree with them, and as soon as we agree, we believe in and accept their version of reality. Once we do this, our faith in this reality is so strong that it controls our whole life. We didn't choose these beliefs, and at around 2 years of age, something within our human nature, or I would say our God nature, may have wanted to rebel against them. But we were not strong enough, and because the adults around us were so much bigger and stronger, the only thing to be done was to surrender to these beliefs by way of our agreement. This process is called domestication. This domestication is so strong, the rewards for agreeing so good, and the punishment for not agreeing so painful, that at a certain point in our life, we no longer need anyone to domesticate us. We are so well trained that we become our own domesticator. So, the belief system we have been given, or the dream world, is like a book of law that rules our mind, and without question, whatever is in the book of law is our truth. We base all of our judgments on this book of law, even if it goes against our own inner nature. Breaking the rules in this book of law causes us to feel fear because it has become our security, because it has become our truth through the process of domestication. And therefore, anything that challenges what we have come to believe makes us feel unsafe and insecure. Even if our book of law is wrong, it still makes us feel safe, which is why we sometimes get trapped there in our illness and in our dysfunction, like the man at the pool of Bethesda, because we've bought into this dream world that's been created, not because it's the truth, but because we've just become comfortable there. And being uncomfortable makes us feel unsafe. So sometimes we choose to stay in our illness, in our story, because we don't like the feeling of uncertainty. But that's not all that's available to us. We always have the choice to wake up from the dream or awaken within the dream, which is why Jesus asked the man, "Will you be made whole?" He knows it is always our choice. Okay, back to the book. In the dream of this planet, or in other words, in the reality we have created, it is normal for humans to suffer, to live in fear, and to create emotional dramas, which is exactly what Eckhart Tolle was just saying. We think of it as a matter of life and death, as a struggle for survival. The outside dream is not a pleasant one. It is a dream of violence, of fear, of war, and of injustice. The personal dreams of humans will vary, but globally it is mostly a nightmare because that is what we have created it to be. Fear controls the outside dream. If we compare the dream of human society with the description of hell that many different religions all around the world have promulgated, we find they are exactly the same. We are living in the dream of hell. No human can condemn another to hell because we are already there. Others can put us into a deeper hell, but only if we allow them to through our agreement. So there it is. Now that I've completely bummed everyone out and brought the whole room down with this picture of hell on earth that we have created for ourselves, we can now begin the process of figuring out how to climb out of this hole, okay, how to awake from this dream. I'm not going to leave you down there, and neither is Don Miguel Ruiz. So according to him, we, through our agreements with each other, have largely created this hell on earth for ourselves, a dream world where war and violence and fear and suffering are the norm, and where we've all been domesticated into the beliefs and reality of the people who came before us. But we know how powerful our thoughts are, okay? We know that if we can make ourselves sick through negative thinking, then we can heal ourselves through positive thinking. We know this, right? We've talked about this many times. The same is true of the power of agreement. If we have created this dream world of hell on earth by all agreeing that that's the truth, then we can also go back and recreate a heaven on earth or a new earth by that same power of agreement. And I'm going to read again now from the book. He goes into a story of the Toltec people who lived in Mexico thousands of years ago. And these Toltec people were very wise. They were masters of science and art and of spiritual knowledge. And so they recognized the power of this agreement, and they created 4 basic agreements that they believed would break us out of this dream world that the humans before them had created, that they viewed as a hell on earth, and bring us into a state of heaven on earth. And I'm going to go through those quickly right now. Agreement number 1, be impeccable with your word. Speak with integrity. Say only what you mean. Avoid using your words to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. Always use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. Okay, so that's number 1. Be impeccable with your word. Number 2, don't take anything personally. Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality, their own dream. When you are immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. Agreement number 3, don't make assumptions. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and drama. With just this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. Lastly, number 4, always do your best, but realize your best is going to change from moment to moment. It will be different when you are healthy as opposed to sick. Under any circumstance, simply do your best, and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. You need a very strong will in order to adopt the 4 agreements, but if you can begin to live your life with these agreements in place, the transformation will be amazing. You will see the drama and the dream of hell disappear right before your eyes, and instead of living in a dream of hell, you will begin creating a new dream, your own personal dream of heaven. All right. So there it is. Don Miguel Ruiz just gave us some very powerful tools we can use to awaken from the dream that we have collectively created. And waking up to this dream or within this dream is how Eckhart Tolle says we can begin to create the new earth. So that's how it all fits together. So let's talk now. You can make a comment or ask any question you have about any aspect of the subject we've been talking about tonight, or maybe some of you have already answered the questions I gave you at the beginning, which, just as a reminder, I'll say, why do we hang on so tightly to our stories of lack and limitation? And secondly, what is the significance of our dreams? And that can be dreams that we dream while we're sleeping, which we didn't really get into in the teaching tonight, but it's a very interesting topic. Or this dream state that we've created through our collective agreement. How do we feel about that? Let's talk.
We'll start with question number 1. And the first 2 kind of go together. Bobby Moore Howard, we hang on so tightly to our stories of limitation and lack due to our environment and family history. We've gotten content in having a poverty mindset, saying that's just the way it is. Then Cheryl Handy shared, most people hang on because they have been conditioned to do so through a collective lower vibrational consciousness passed down from generations. Those made me think about the Bruce Hornsby song, The Way It Is. And he sets up several scenarios that are very much like the story of the man by the pool of Bethesda, where, people are poor, they don't have a job, whatever the scenario was. And the chorus goes, that's just the way it is. Some things will never change. That's just the way it is. But don't you believe them?
Yes, absolutely. That is the key. What makes something true or not is if you believe it, like we were talking about in so many of those scenarios. The man was lying by that pool for 38 years, believing that was just his lot in life. And then all of a sudden one day, Jesus came along and said, rise, take up your bed and walk. And because he believed it, he did it. So, yes, both of those comments by Miss Bobby and Miss Cheryl were very good. We believe this because we've been conditioned to believe it, just like the book of the 4 agreements was saying, because all of these generations of people before us, before we even got here and incarnated into this physical being, they had already created this dream that we came into. But we have the choice, is what I believe both of these men are saying. Both Eckhart Tolle and Don Miguel Ruiz are saying we have a choice. We can, and a lot of us do, buy into this dream that's already been created, this collective scenario of how life just has to be, that it's a struggle to survive, that it's hard, that it's dog eat dog. Or we can wake up and realize it's a dream and step back and say, that's not all that's available to me. If I don't agree with that, then I have the ability and I have the power within myself to recreate a new earth, a new dream, a new reality, because it takes your agreement in order to buy into it. Yes. Thank you very much, Miss Cheryl and Miss Bobby.
2 more responses to that question. This is from Eye of Ra Productions. We often cling tightly to our stories of limitation and lack because they're like our comfort zones. They give us a sense of who we are, even if it's not great. Letting go is tough and unfamiliar. Similarly, Richard Copeland said, personally, they remind me of what I have had to endure and where I came from. That is, my journey and sometimes my roots and history. I also consider them as learning experiences. However, they also help me to learn from past experiences to better plan for the present as well as the future.
Absolutely. Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, both of those statements are wonderful. That, our stories, again, they become our identity, and we don't know who we are without them. And I know that I am treading onto sticky, tricky territory here, because I understand the enormous amount of good Alcoholics Anonymous has done in the world. 12-step programs have helped millions upon millions of people, and it works for a lot of people. The one problem I have with that, though, is how even if a person has gone to these meetings for years and years and years, they begin by declaring, hello, my name is so-and-so, I'm an alcoholic. And part of their ethos, part of their philosophy is, you will be an alcoholic until the day you die. You have to fight it every single day. And I don't know. I've never been an alcoholic. But something down in my gut, it doesn't sit well with me that if you've come out of it, if you've made a different decision, if you've awakened from that behavior and now you are living a different life, I don't personally see the value in still hanging on to that story of every single meeting you go to for the rest of your life, still saying with your mouth, I am an alcoholic. I personally wish that would change. Now, they didn't ask me. They're probably not going to change that. And again, that might work for some people, and I don't have a personal experience with it. But that's, by the same token, it's people that have a certain disease. Well, if you keep saying with your mouth, if you go to the doctor and you sit on the table and they say, you have blah, blah, blah. Well, you have a choice. You can say, oh my gosh, I have this. Okay, tell me what to do. I got to be on this medicine. I got to have this surgery. I got to blah, 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 blah. Or you can say, I have heard many stories of people who've said, no, I don't. That's not going to be my story. Somebody that I quote a lot in my Tuesday morning teachings, Dr. Kim DeRamo, she went through that herself. She is a doctor herself, and she was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and she just said something in her said, no. They kept telling her, this is never going to go away. The best you're going to be able to do is manage these symptoms. And she decided, no, that is not going to be my story. And guess what? It wasn't. She's completely healed from that now, and she has turned her entire practice into helping other people do the same. So that whole idea of agreement of, yes, there is a story we're born into, our family, our culture, whatever country, what people tell you about yourself in your formative years. But when you wake up, you realize, I have a choice. I can agree with this, or I don't have to. I had a quote yesterday in my teaching that I had quoted before of Deepak Chopra's that says, do I want to be a prisoner of my past, or do I want to be a pioneer of my future? And that is always a choice that we are capable of making. We just have to know that we have that choice. Okay,
moving on to question number 2 now. First comment from Laverne Bryant. Oh my goodness, I know for me, dreams can help solve problems and answer questions that we can't figure out when you're awake. That reminded me of when you've taught on Tuesday mornings before, about before you go to bed, if you have a question or a problem that you need solved, turn it over to your subconscious, and you got a term for it that I can't remember. It seemed like it was subconsciously.
Subconscious, yeah, that's what they call it.
Okay, and that when you wake in the morning, your subconscious mind would have worked on it overnight and present you the answer.
Exactly. That's so interesting that you remembered that. And yes, that is a thing. It's called subconsciousing because, as we know, there's so much information that is constantly coming into our awareness, and that we're only aware of a very minute portion of that. So much of that just gets stored somewhere back in our brains. That's what our subconscious is made of. So, yes, there's actually a practice that you can say to yourself, okay, I don't have the answer for this. I need, a lot of times on Monday nights before I teach on Tuesday, I won't have a good ending for the teaching, and I'll say, I'm tired. I can't think about this anymore. I'm just going to go to bed. God, dig through all the files of my subconscious while I am asleep, because when you're asleep, you're in that subconscious state where you can go through all of that stuff that you're not aware of when you are awake, and give me something. And it has never failed that in the morning it'll come to me. Oh, this is what I should say. Sometimes even driving on the way here, it'll come to me. So yes, Miss Laverne, that is wonderful that dreams sometimes, they're not just random. Sometimes they feel like that. Sometimes when you wake up, you're like, wow, that was crazy. Where did that come from? But it's always something that's in your subconscious, and you can learn to use that as a tool, like Benny was talking about, and like I have taught about before. That teaching is not original to me. I got it from someone else. But that whole process of intentionally saying before you go to sleep, I need this answer. I don't think I can come up with it in my conscious mind, but somewhere I know it's there. Spirit, help bring this up from my subconscious to my conscious. Now, that's the good form of dreaming. The bad form of dreaming is what we've been talking about, this dream world that they were talking about that has been created that's kind of negative. This other, the balance to that is that's the positive way you can use dreaming. Thanks, Miss Laverne.
Continuing that same train of thought, Cheryl Handy shared, I have intentionally cultivated a daily practice of mindfulness meditation at bedtime that has contributed to my dreams being more of inspirational visions and revelations. Absolutely,
absolutely. That is a wonderful practice to have, because when you're asleep, you are a little bit vulnerable. Your subconscious, it's open. So it just makes sense. Why do you think that became a practice of the Christian church, to pray before you go to bed, to pray with your children? Now I lay me down to sleep, because that is a time when your subconscious is kind of wide open. So yes, you can intentionally say, this is what I want to think about, dream about. I want an answer to this, or I want to think about this, and it will happen, because you have, again, we tend to think that there's so much that's out of our control. Like Eckhart Tolle was saying, and like the Don Miguel Ruiz was saying, we have been trained and conditioned to believe that so much is just out of our control, that this is just the way that it is and we can't change it. But we actually can. We just have to be intentional about it.
Okay, two final comments on this question, and they really go together well. Richard Copeland shared, when I awake from a dream, good or bad, I often ask myself what God or Spirit is trying to tell me. I feel the purpose of dreams is to help better align and refocus my future thinking and behavior. However, most important, to connect me with my spiritual being and self. Then T. Bond shared, I think dreams are often messages from our higher self. Yeah, our higher selves. The dreams are used to communicate with us to help us evolve in the 3D world.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful way to look at it. And again, that provides the perfect, we talked a lot about in the beginning of this, the balance, that you have to find the balance. So we've seen what the bad kind of dreaming can get you. Now what we've just talked about is how we can kind of take control with our mindfulness, with our intentionality, and put dreams or our dream state to good use. Yes, you can say, higher self, source, God, while I am asleep, please send me messages in the form of my dreams that when I wake up can help me navigate through whatever it is I have to navigate through down here in this 3D temporary existence. Beautiful, wonderful. Is that all we have? Okay. Thank you so much for participating tonight. I love this teaching, and I thought it was how wonderfully it fit in to that book, The Four Agreements, and that whole idea of the dream world and how important our agreement is, and that we know the power that we have inside of us to come out of that dream state and say, this is not what reality is, or this is not what my reality is. This is what my reality is going to be. We all have that power. So let's end tonight with our affirmation together, and we will see you again on Friday morning as well as Sunday. Let's say together before we end this evening, tonight I am willing to recognize dysfunction. If suffering is the normal state of humanity, I do not wish to be normal. I do not agree. If I have created God in my image, I will surrender to the truth that I am made in God's image. I am neither an external physical form nor any internal thought form. I am a spiritual being capable of experiencing physical form and the observing presence open to considering a diversity of thoughts. My present thoughts do not reflect my eternal capacity. My potential for awakening to self and spiritual transformation is endless. Amen. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. We will see you again on Friday and then on Sunday.